Chef stomped on a simple cook's recipe and lost a $2 million deal. Michael Roberts felt his blood boil when he saw the new kitchen assistant fiddling with yellowed papers during work hours. His anger exploded when he realized she was consulting a handwritten recipe while preparing vegetables for dinner. "What is this?" shouted the chef, snatching the paper from Grace Wilson's hands. "Grandma's recipe in my kitchen. Here, only French techniques are allowed, understood?" Without waiting for a response, Michael tore the paper to pieces in front of the entire staff at the Garden, the most prestigious restaurant in New York. The yellowed fragments fell to the marble floor as he stomped on them forcefully, his voice echoing through the stainless steel kitchen. "Family recipes have no place in a professional kitchen," he continued to yell. "Do you think you're at your mum's house?" Grace, a woman in her early 40s with hair tucked under a navy blue cap, simply lowered her head. Her hands trembled as she resumed chopping the vegetables, but her teary eyes revealed a pain that went far beyond the humiliation of the moment. That torn paper was the only material inheritance left from her grandmother Dorothy, a cook who had worked for wealthy families decades ago. The other staff members averted their eyes, pretending to be busy with their tasks. They were familiar with Chef Michael's outbursts, which had grown even crueler since the restaurant began facing financial difficulties. Sous Chef Jennifer Miller sighed softly, tired of witnessing these scenes. "And you," Michael pointed at Grace. "If you can't follow the basic rules of this establishment, you can find another place to work." Grace swallowed her tears and continued chopping the vegetables with precision. She needed that job to support her sick mother and pay the rent for their modest home in Queens. She couldn't afford to fight back, even if her heart was shattered. The night remained tense in the kitchen. Michael kept barking orders and criticizing every move the team made, but something about the quiet dignity with which Grace continued working bothered him even more. When the shift ended, Grace carefully collected every torn piece of the recipe, storing the fragments in a plastic bag. Jennifer watched from afar, her heart aching. "Grace, are you okay?" the sous chef asked as she approached. "I'm fine, Ms. Jennifer. It's just... that recipe was my grandmother's," Grace murmured, her eyes still wet. "What recipe was it?" "A special shrimp gumbo. She said she learned it from a very kind employer back in the 50s. It was the dish she loved making most." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The next morning, Michael arrived at the restaurant with his usual aggressive energy, but was surprised by the presence of a well-dressed man at the entrance. Wearing an impeccable Italian suit, the visitor introduced himself as Richard Thompson, a representative of a group of international investors. "Chef Michael, I need to speak with you about an urgent matter," Richard said, his voice grave. "Of course, Mr. Richard. How can I help you?" Michael's tone shifted entirely, adopting his most cordial demeanor. "I represent a group of businessmen considering a significant investment in your restaurant. We're talking about $2 million. Michael's eyes lit up. That money would be the salvation of the Garden, which had been struggling financially as competition in the area increased. "It would be a pleasure to host them, Mr. Richard. We can prepare a special dinner to showcase our work." "Actually, there's a specific condition," Richard interrupted. "One of the main investors, Mr. Anthony Pearson, has a very personal history. He grew up being cared for by the family's nanny, a woman who made a dish that deeply marked his childhood." Michael nodded, trying to show genuine interest. "I see. What kind of dish?" "A shrimp gumbo with a very specific preparation. Not just any gumbo, chef. It's a traditional recipe, passed down through generations. Mr. Anthony said he's never tasted anything like it since the nanny passed away." Michael's world stopped. The blood drained from his face as the words echoed in his mind. Shrimp gumbo. Traditional recipe. Passed down through generations. It was exactly what was written on the paper he had destroyed the day before. Do you have more details about this recipe?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I have some information. The nanny's name was Dorothy. She worked for the Pearson family in the 50s. The dish had a very particular seasoning, a way of preparing it that she learned from her own mother, Mr. Anthony always said it was like every spoonful brought back the warmth of his childhood. Michael felt his legs weaken. Dorothy? That was Grace's grandmother's name. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. And when would this tasting be? He managed to ask. A week from today. Mr. Anthony is coming all the way from Chicago just to try the dish. If he approves, we'll sign the contract that same night. After Richard left, Michael rushed to the kitchen looking for Grace. He needed to talk to her urgently. Maybe she could give him some information about the destroyed recipe. But Jennifer stopped him at the entrance. Chef, if you're looking for Grace, she's not coming back. What do you mean? She spent the whole night crying in the locker room. Early this morning she left her apron and asked me to tell you she's quitting. Do you know where she lives? Jennifer hesitated. She knew the chef's temper well and feared the consequences. Why do you want to know? It's urgent, Jennifer. Very urgent. The sous chef studied his face, seeing something like desperation for the first time. She lives in Queens, but I don't know the exact address. Michael spent the rest of the day in growing anguish. He tried to recreate the shrimp gumbo using his refined techniques, but every attempt ended in failure. The flavor was always off. Something was missing, and he couldn't figure out what. He asked other staff about traditional gumbo recipes, searched online, called fellow chefs. Nothing he found matched the specific description Richard had given. On the 5th try, he angrily threw the pot in the trash. Damn it! How can a simple recipe be so hard to get right? Jennifer watched from a distance, noting the chef's growing desperation. She knew Michael was facing the biggest challenge of his career, but part of her felt he was reaping what he'd sown. At the end of the shift, Michael sought out Deborah, the restaurant's longest-serving cleaner. If anyone knew the staff and their stories, it would be her. Deborah, do you know Grace? Do you know where she lives? The 60-year-old woman looked at him suspiciously. I do. Why do you want to know? I need to talk to her about something important. Important for who? For you or for her? Michael bristled at the direct question, but held back his anger. He needed the information. It's about work. Chef, with all due respect, after what you did yesterday, I think it's best to leave the girl alone. She's suffered enough. Deborah, please, it's really urgent. The cleaner sighed, remembering how she'd found Grace crying in the locker room. She lives on Maple Street near the Queens Farmers Market, house number 247. But I'll tell you something, Chef, that girl is good people, hardworking and honest. If you're going to bother her, you'll have to go through me first. Michael noted the address, ignoring the warning tone in the cleaner's voice. His mind was already too occupied with the problem of the lost recipe. The next morning, he left the kitchen in Jennifer's care and drove to Queens. The working-class neighborhood contrasted sharply with the upscale areas he frequented. Simple houses lined the narrow streets, children played on the sidewalks, and the smell of home-cooked meals drifted through open windows. He found number 247, a small, well-kept house with a garden full of herbs and a porch where laundry dried on a clothesline. He took a deep breath before knocking. Grace answered, wearing a simple dress and slippers. Her expression changed immediately when she saw him. Chef Michael? What are you doing here? Grace, I need to talk to you. It's about the recipe He hesitated, the words refusing to come out. About the recipe you destroyed, she finished, her tone icy. Can I come in? It's important. I have nothing to say to you, and my mother is resting. Grace started to close the door, but Michael put his hand out to stop her. Please, it's about a very important contract. I need your grandmother's recipe. Oh, now you need it. Her eyes flashed with a mix of anger and hurt. Yesterday it was trash, today it's important. Grace, I know I messed up, but messed up? Her voice rose. You humiliated a recipe that was all I had left of my grandmother. You trampled on it in front of everyone like it was garbage. I can make it right, I can pay for the recipe. Grace's expression shifted to something Michael had never seen before, pure contempt. Pay? You think everything in life has a price? That you can destroy people and then buy forgiveness? Just then, a young voice called from inside the house. Mom, who's at the door? A woman in her 20s appeared behind Grace. She had the same expressive eyes as her mother, but wore professional clothes that hinted at a different social standing. "Amanda, this is Chef Michael from the restaurant where I used to work." "Where you used to work?" Amanda looked at the man curiously, then turned back to her mother. "I thought you were still working there." "I quit yesterday," Grace murmured. "Why?" Silence stretched for several seconds. Michael shifted uncomfortably under the young woman's probing gaze. "Mum, what happened?" Grace briefly recounted the incident with the recipe. Amanda listened quietly, her expression growing more serious by the second. "So you're the chef who humiliated my mother?" Amanda addressed Michael directly, her voice sharp with authority. It was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Amanda let out a bitter laugh. "Tearing up and stomping on a family recipe is a misunderstanding?" Michael noticed the young woman's upright posture, the way she spoke. There was something professional in her demeanor. "What do you do for work?" he asked, trying to shift the conversation. "I'm a labor attorney," Amanda replied curtly, "and I've heard plenty of stories about abusive chefs who treat employees like trash." "Amanda, you don't have to—" Grace tried to intervene. "No, Mom, I do." Amanda turned back to Michael. "My mother has worked in 5 different kitchens over the last 10 years. Do you know how many times she's come home crying? How many times she's had to swallow humiliation just to keep her job?" Michael felt smaller and smaller under the young attorney's gaze. "Chefs like you think you can treat employees like slaves. You yell, you humiliate, you destroy people's self-esteem. And you know why? Because you can. Because there's always someone desperate enough for work to put up with the abuse." "I didn't know that." "Of course you didn't," Amanda cut him off. "You people never do. They never stop to think that on the other side is a person with feelings, with a story, with dignity." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Grace placed her hand on her daughter's arm, trying to calm her. "Enough, Amanda. He's already understood." "Understood?" Amanda looked at Michael. "Did you really understand what you did? Do you understand that recipe was the only material thing left from her grandmother? That when you trampled on that paper, you trampled on a memory that can never be recovered?" Michael felt something stir in his chest. For the first time, he saw his actions through someone else's eyes. It wasn't just about a recipe or an old piece of paper. It was about memory, history, respect. I really didn't think—" "That's exactly the problem," Amanda continued. "You never think. You act on impulse, on anger, on the power you think you have. And then you try to fix it with money." A weak voice called from inside the house. "Grace, who's at the door?" "It's Grandma Martha," Grace explained to Michael. "My mother. She's sick." "Maybe she'd like to speak to the chef," Amanda suggested, her voice still dripping with sarcasm. "Amanda, please." "No, Mom. If he came here for our great-grandmother's recipe, he should at least meet the family he's trying to use." Grace hesitated, then sighed. "Come in, but only for a few minutes." The house was small but very clean. Old but well-kept furniture filled the simple living room. Photographs in cheap frames showed 3 generations of women: a young Grace, Amanda as a child, and an elderly woman who must have been Grandma Dorothy. Michael noticed a photo where Dorothy stood wearing a white apron next to a kitchen that clearly belonged to a wealthy home. "Is this your grandmother?" he asked. "Was," Grace corrected. "She passed away 5 years ago." "And the recipe, it was the only concrete thing she left me. The rest is just memories." They walked to the bedroom where Martha, an 80-year-old woman, sat on the bed. Her eyes were still sharp, but her frail body betrayed years of hard work and illness. "Grandma, this is Chef Michael," Grace introduced. "The chef who destroyed Dorothy's recipe?" Martha asked bluntly. Michael was taken aback by the old woman's directness. Yes, and I came here to try to make it right." "Make it right?" Martha chuckled softly. "Young man, some things in this world can't be fixed. You can only learn from them." "Did you know Dorothy?" "I did. We worked together for many years." Michael perked up. So you know the recipe? I know a lot about that recipe, Martha said, studying him intently. But before I say anything, I want you to answer me one question. Of course. Why do you want the recipe now? Michael hesitated. Mentioning the $2 million contract would sound even more opportunistic. It's for a special client. What client? A businessman who has ties to the family Dorothy worked for. Martha stared at him for several long seconds. What's this businessman's name? Richard Thompson. No, the final client, the one who'll taste the food. Anthony Pearson. Martha's expression changed completely. Her eyes widened, and she straightened up in bed. Tony? Tony Pearson? You know him? I knew him when he was a boy, Martha sighed. I worked for the family too. I was Dorothy's friend. So the two of you, we created the recipe together, Martha finished. During the hard times of the war, when ingredients were scarce, we had to find ways to make good food with what little we had. Michael's heart raced. He was standing before the other half of the story. Can you teach me the recipe? I could, but I won't. Why? Because you still don't understand what that recipe represents. Grace and Amanda watched the conversation in silence. It was the first time Martha had spoken so much about the past since her illness had worsened. Grandma, tell him, Amanda encouraged. Martha adjusted herself in bed and began to speak, her voice growing stronger as the memories flowed. It was 1954. I was 20 years old and had just started working at the Pearsons' house. Dorothy had already been there for about 2 years. It was a big house on the Upper East Side with a huge kitchen and lots of activity. Michael moved closer, fascinated by the story. Mr. Albert Pearson, Tony's father, was a good man. He treated the staff with respect. His wife, Mrs. Helen, was also a very elegant and kind woman. And Tony, oh, he was a mischievous but sweet boy. How did you create the recipe? Oh, that was the day everything changed in the house, Martha said with a sad smile. Mr. Albert got sick, very sick. The doctors said he needed special care, rest, light but nutritious food. And then, Mrs. Helen was desperate. Little Tony was also very sad. He barely ate. The whole house felt heavy, you know, that awful feeling when someone you care about is suffering. Grace moved closer to her mother, pulling up a chair to sit by the bed. That's when Dorothy and I decided to do something, Martha continued. We wanted to make something special, something that would bring a little joy to that family. Shrimp gumbo? Not just any gumbo. Dorothy knew how to make the basic dish. She'd learned it from her mother back in New Orleans. But I knew some different spices, some techniques my indigenous grandmother had taught me as a child. Michael leaned forward, absorbing every word. We spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen, testing, mixing, tasting. Dorothy with her base, me with my spices. She said it had to have palm oil, but not too much. I insisted it needed a touch of cumin, just a hint. She wanted fresh coconut milk. I thought freshly ground black pepper made all the difference. And did it work? When we served that dish, it was magic. Martha's eyes sparkled at the memory. Mr. Albert had 2 servings. Mrs. Helen cried with joy, and Tony, oh, that boy licked his plate clean. But the recipe wasn't just the dish, young man. It was what was behind it. It was 2 women who respected each other, who combined their knowledge, who put love and care into every spoonful. It was about family, about taking care, about doing our best for the people we love. Michael felt something stir deep inside him. For the first time, he began to understand what he had destroyed the day before. Did Mr. Albert get better? He did. And do you know what he said to us when he recovered? What? He said that dish tasted like home, like family, like love. That's what real food should always be like. Amanda, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. Did you keep making the dish? We made it a few more times, but then I left the Pearsons' house. I got married, moved to another neighborhood. Dorothy stayed a few more years until Tony grew up, but we never saw each other again. Do you remember the full recipe? Michael asked, trying not to sound too eager. I remember every step. Martha looked straight at him. But I won't teach it to you. Please, I promise I'll... What are you going to do? Make the dish with French technique, use expensive ingredients and fancy presentation, serve it on fine china and charge $300 a plate. Michael fell silent, realizing Martha had hit the mark. That recipe isn't about technique, young man. It's about soul. It's about two women who respected each other and created something together. It's about cooking with love for people you care about. But I can learn. Can you really? Martha straightened up in bed. Can you respect a simple recipe? Can you understand that not everything needs to be fancy to be special? I'd like to try. Try? Grace finally spoke. Yesterday you said family recipes have no place in a professional kitchen. I was wrong. Were you? Amanda crossed her arms. Or are you just sorry because you need the recipe now? The question hung in the silent room. Michael realized he didn't have an honest answer. I don't know, he finally admitted. Maybe it's a bit of both. The unexpected sincerity caught the three women off guard. At least you're honest, Martha remarked. That's a start. What do I need to do to earn a second chance? It's not me you need to make things right with, Martha pointed to Grace. It's her. She's the one you humiliated. Her legacy is what you destroyed. Michael turned to Grace, who had stayed quiet the whole time. What do you want from me? I want you to leave my house and never come back, she replied without hesitation. Grace, no. You came here because you need something, not because you care about how I feel or what I lost. If there were another way to get that recipe, you wouldn't even be here. Michael couldn't deny it because it was true. What if I pay you a fair price for the recipe? I already said it's not for sale. Grace, let's be practical. You need work, I need the recipe. We can make a deal that benefits everyone. A deal? Amanda stood up from her chair. You still don't get it, do you? Amanda, let me speak. Grace stood up too. Chef Michael, you want to know the difference between you and me? What? You think everything in life is a transaction. Pay, receive, negotiate, profit. I've learned there are things you can't buy or sell, values money can't reach. But you need work. I do, and I'll find another job, without having to put up with people like you, who think they can humiliate others and then buy forgiveness. Michael felt a mix of frustration and something he couldn't name. Maybe it was respect. What do you want then? I want you to learn that people aren't disposable. That family recipes do belong in a kitchen because they carry history and love. I want you to treat your next employees with dignity. Fine. I promise I'll change. Promises are easy to make, Martha interjected. Keeping them is hard. How can I prove I'm serious? The three women exchanged glances. Grace took a deep breath. Grandma Martha, do you think... I think everyone deserves a second chance, the elderly woman replied. But it has to be earned. What do you want me to do? Martha studied his face once more. If you want to learn the recipe, you'll have to learn it the right way, our way. What do you mean? You'll have to come here every day for a week. You'll help in the kitchen. You'll listen to the stories. You'll understand what it means to cook with love. And you'll learn that a recipe isn't just a list of ingredients. Michael thought about the tight deadline, the contract that depended on the tasting's success. A whole week? If that's too long, you can leave now, Grace said, because if you're going to half-ass it, don't bother. And if I do all this, will you teach me the full recipe? If you do it right, with an open heart to learn, maybe, Martha replied. But I can't promise anything. Michael looked around the simple room, at the 3 generations of women challenging him in ways he'd never experienced. His entire life had been about control, about imposing his will, about getting what he wanted through power and intimidation. All right, I accept. Accept what? Asked Amanda suspiciously. I accept learning your way. I accept coming here every day and doing whatever is necessary. No guarantees, Grace emphasized. No guarantees. And without paying anything for the recipe, added Martha. Without paying anything. Then you can start tomorrow, said Grace. 7 in the morning. And don't come dressed like a chef. Come dressed like a normal person. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing, the next morning Michael parked his imported car 2 blocks before Grace's house. He didn't want to draw attention with the expensive vehicle on a street where most people relied on public transportation. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, feeling strange without his chef's uniform. He knocked on the door promptly at 7. Grace answered, wearing a floral apron and flip-flops. Punctual. That's good, she remarked. Come in. The house smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. In the small but organized kitchen, Martha sat on a chair peeling potatoes with skilled hands despite her age. Good morning, Mrs. Martha. Good morning, young man. Ready to work? Ready. Then start by washing this sink full of last night's dinner dishes, ordered Grace. And don't just wash them any old way, make them shine. Michael looked at the sink piled with plates, pots, and silverware. It had been years since he'd washed dishes by hand. Where's the detergent? In the cabinet under the sink. For the first few minutes, Michael struggled to find an efficient rhythm. He was used to industrial dishwashers and teams of assistants handling the cleaning. That's not how you wash a pot, Martha chided. You have to let it soak first, then scrub it gently without scratching the bottom. Gently. Everything in the kitchen is done with care, young man. Even washing dishes. If you don't take care of your tools, they won't take care of your food. Grace watched from a distance as she prepared breakfast. It was strange seeing the arrogant chef struggling with basic kitchen tasks. Chef Michael, answer me something, she said. How many years has it been since you last washed a dish? A few years. How many? Maybe 15. 15 years? Martha stopped peeling potatoes. And how can you understand a kitchen if you don't know every part of it? I know the important parts. Every part is important, Grace countered, from the person who peels the garlic to the one who plates the dish. If you think washing dishes isn't important, you'll never understand what it means to work in a real kitchen. Michael continued washing in silence, reflecting on her words. At the garden, there was an entire team dedicated to cleaning, people he barely noticed during his shifts. Done, he announced when he finished. Grace inspected every plate, every pot, every utensil. This glass still has grease. This pot has food stuck to it. This knife isn't shining. But it's clean. Chef, if it's not perfect, it's not good. Don't you teach that in your kitchen? Michael took the rejected items and returned to the sink. Grace was right. He demanded perfection from his team, but wasn't holding himself to the same standard. On his second try, he passed inspection. Better. Now you can have coffee with us. They sat at the small kitchen table. Grace poured strong coffee into simple porcelain cups, served with warm bread and homemade butter. Who made this bread? Michael asked after his first bite. I did, Grace replied. I wake up at 5:30 every day to make fresh bread. It's delicious. What's the recipe? It's my grandmother's too, she said, with a hint of melancholy. One of the few I managed to save. Michael realized the irony. He was praising the exact kind of family recipe he had once dismissed. Grace, about that day, I really wanted to apologize. You already did yesterday. No, yesterday I apologized because I needed something. Today I'm apologizing because I realized how much I hurt you. Grace studied him for a few seconds. What changed between yesterday and today? Being here, seeing how you all live, how you take care of each other, how you do things with care and love. It's different from my world. Different how? In my world, everything is about results, about making money, impressing clients, being the best. Here it feels like things have a different value. Martha smiled for the first time since he arrived. You're starting to understand, young man. Understand what? That real food isn't about technique or sophistication. It's about care. It's about making something good for the people who matter to you. But at the restaurant you make food to earn money, Grace said. There's nothing wrong with that. It's your job. But when you dismiss family recipes, when you think only French technique is valid, you're missing the essence of what cooking really is. What essence? Nourishing people, bringing joy, creating cherished memories. making someone feel at home. Michael sipped his coffee in silence, processing her words. So now what? What are we doing today? Today, you're learning how to shop, Grace announced. We're going to the Queen's Farmers Market, and you're carrying the bags. The Queen's Farmers Market was a whole new world for Michael. Used to suppliers delivering hand-picked ingredients straight to the restaurant, he had never experienced the routine of personally selecting each item. Grace guided him through the aisles, stopping at stalls for vegetables, meats, and spices. See this banana? She picked up a yellow fruit with a few brown spots. Would you buy this at your restaurant? No, it's overripe. It's perfect for banana bread. The spots show the sugar has developed. It'll be much sweeter and tastier than a green banana. Michael watched as she picked ingredients he would normally reject. Tomatoes that weren't perfectly round, kale leaves with small insect holes, carrots of different sizes. But at the restaurant, presentation. At the restaurant, you throw away half the good ingredients because they don't look perfect, Grace countered. Here, we know flavor has nothing to do with beauty. At the fish stall, she talked at length with the vendor about where the shrimp came from, how it was stored, and which size would be best for the dish she had in mind. Joe, is this shrimp from Long Island? Yes, Mom, came in early yesterday. Look how fresh it is. She examined the shrimp carefully, smelling them, checking the color, testing the texture. Perfect. I'll take 2 pounds of the medium ones. Making your famous shrimp gumbo? Maybe, she said, with a mysterious smile. Michael noticed how familiar Grace was with the vendors. She knew each one's story, asked about their families, and got advice on the best products. Grace, try this new batch of cane sugar, offered a woman at the sweet stall. It's from Louisiana, just like the kind your grandmother loved. Grace tasted it and smiled. I'll take 2, one for coconut candy, the other for Grandma Martha to enjoy with her coffee. How do you know so many people? Michael asked as they walked. I've been shopping here for 15 years, ever since I moved to Queens. They're more than vendors, they're friends. They helped me a lot when I was going through hard times. What kind of difficulties? Grace hesitated before answering. When my mother got sick, when Amanda was studying for her college entrance exams, when I lost my job, they always found a way to help. Let me pay later, set aside the best products, gave advice. And how did you repay them? By cooking for them when they needed it, taking care of their sick kids, helping with bills when they couldn't read well. That's how a real community works. Michael carried the increasingly heavy bags, but his mind was occupied with the lessons he learned at every stop. Back at the house, Grace taught him how to organize the ingredients in the small fridge, making use of every inch of space. Greens go down here so they don't wilt. Meat in the middle, wrapped tight. Fresh herbs in this little jar with water to last longer. That's a lot of organization for a small fridge. When you have little space, you have to be smarter. When you have little money, you can't waste anything. The afternoon was dedicated to preparing lunch. Michael expected them to start with the shrimp gumbo, but Grace had other plans. Today we're making rice, beans, stewed chicken, and tomato salad. Basic food? Basic food made with care becomes special, Martha said from her chair. Let's see if you can make fluffy rice. To Michael's surprise, making perfect rice turned out to be more challenging than he imagined. Used to fancy equipment and precise recipes, he struggled to find the right moment just by sight and sound. Not like that, Grace corrected when he stirred the rice in the pot. You don't stir rice, otherwise it turns to mush. But how do I know if it's cooking right? By the smell, the sound, the experience. Some things aren't learned with exact measurements. They're learned with practice and attention. The beans also brought their own lessons. Grace taught him to pick through them one by one, removing the spoiled ones and little stones. This takes too long, Michael complained. It does. But that's what makes the difference between good beans and just any beans. There's no rush in home cooking. But in the restaurant, you can do it another way. But here, you'll learn to do it right, even if it takes longer. While the beans cooked, Martha told stories about the days she worked for wealthy families. It was a different world back then. The ladies would sit in the parlor, embroidering or receiving guests. The kitchen was our territory. Dorothy was very skilled. She knew how to make fancy dishes and simple food. She cooked both styles well. She did. But what she made with the most love was the simple food. She said fancy food was for impressing people, but simple food was for truly nourishing. And the shrimp gumbo recipe? That recipe was special because it brought both worlds together. It had the technique of refined food but the soul of home cooking. Michael mentally noted every detail, every story, every technique he learned. Lunch was ready by mid-afternoon. They sat at the simple table and Michael tasted each dish carefully. "It's different," he remarked. "Different how?" Grace asked. "It has a more real flavor, tastier than I expected." "That's because it was made with time and care," Martha explained. "And because you helped make it. When you're part of the whole process, the food tastes different. At the restaurant, I only taste the finished dish, and you miss half the experience. The smell while it cooks, the texture changing, the seasoning developing. Those things are part of the joy of cooking." After lunch, Michael helped wash the dishes again. This time, he was quicker and more efficient. "Better," Grace approved. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "I will. What time?" "Same time. And tomorrow we'll start talking about the shrimp gumbo." "Are we making the recipe?" "Let's talk about her. You're not ready to do it yet." Michael returned home with his mind racing. The experience had been completely different from anything he knew about cooking. Slower, more thoughtful, more human. At the restaurant, which he visited briefly to check how things were going, Jennifer greeted him with surprise. "Chef, where were you? I tried calling several times." "I was learning a few things." "Learning?" "About the $2 million contract. I'm working on it." Jennifer noticed something different in his demeanor, but couldn't quite place it. "How's the kitchen running?" "Much calmer," she admitted. "Without you yelling, the team works more harmoniously." The observation bothered Michael more than he cared to admit. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Am I very difficult to work with?" The sous chef hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Chef, you're demanding." "Demanding or abusive? Why are you asking this?" "Just answer, please." Jennifer sighed. "You're talented, chef, very talented. But sometimes you treat the team like they're machines, like they don't have feelings." "Give me an example." "Last week you yelled at Carl because he was 5 minutes late, but you didn't know his daughter had spent the night in the hospital with pneumonia." Michael remembered the incident. He had indeed shouted at the assistant without asking why he was late. Why didn't he explain? Because you didn't give him a chance. You started yelling before he could speak. "And are you all afraid of me?" Jennifer looked down. "Sometimes, yes." The answer hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He had always prided himself on running an efficient kitchen, but had never stopped to consider the human cost of that efficiency. "Jennifer, if you could change one thing about how I work, what would it be?" "Do you want an honest answer?" "I do." "Listen more, yell less. Treat the team like people, not employees." Michael nodded silently, processing her words. The next morning, he arrived at Grace's house 5 minutes before 7. She opened the door wearing the same floral apron, but this time smiled when she saw him. Punctual again. I like that. "Good morning, Grace." "Good morning, Martha." "Good morning, young man. Ready for day 2 of school?" "Absolutely." "Then let's start by talking about the gumbo," Grace announced. "But first, you'll tell me what you learned yesterday." "I learned that cooking carefully takes longer, but the result is better. I learned that knowing the ingredients makes a difference. I learned that washing dishes is an important part of the process." "And what else?" "I learned that maybe I don't know as much about cooking as I thought." Martha clapped slowly. "Now you're starting to understand." "Grace, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Why do you still want to teach me the recipe after everything I've done?" Grace sat at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee slowly. "Because my grandmother always said good recipes should be shared, that there's no point in keeping knowledge just for yourself. But I don't deserve, maybe not yet, but anyone can change. And if you truly change, you can make a difference for others too." "How so?" "How many employees work at your restaurant?" 15. 15 people who could be treated with more respect. 15 people who could work in a better environment. 15 families who could benefit if you learned to be a better boss. Michael had never thought of it that way. And now let's talk about the gumbo, Martha said, but not about how to make it, about what it represents. What does it represent? It represents connection. The recipe was born from the connection between me and Dorothy, between the spices from her northeast and the indigenous spices I knew, between two different ways of seeing food. Is it a fusion recipe? It's a recipe of respect, corrected Grace. My grandmother respected Mrs. Martha's knowledge. Mrs. Martha respected my grandmother's knowledge. Neither tried to impose on the other. And you think I don't have that respect? You have respect for French technique, for famous recipes, for famous chefs, said Martha. But you don't respect simple wisdom, the knowledge that doesn't come from expensive schools. How can I develop that respect? By listening, by trying, by understanding that everyone working in a kitchen can teach you something. Grace stood up and went to a drawer, pulling out an old cardboard box. Want to see some of my grandmother's things? May I? She opened the box, revealing old photographs, some letters and scraps of paper with handwritten recipes. These are the recipes I managed to save. Some are incomplete, others almost illegible, but each one tells a story. Michael examined the papers carefully, noticing the careful handwriting, the simple ingredients, the notes in the margins. To season the beans the way Tony likes, he read aloud. Extra sugar in the coconut candy for Mrs. Helen. Less pepper in the stew. Dr. Albert can't eat it spicy. See? Grace pointed to the notes. She tailored each dish for every person in the family, knew their tastes, their limits, their preferences. At the restaurant, we make the dish the same every time. At the restaurant, you serve many different people. You can't personalize everything, but you can cook with the same care, the same desire to please. Martha picked up one of the photographs. This one's from Tony's birthday party. He turned 10. In the photo, a smiling boy stood next to a table full of food. In the background, two women in aprons watched proudly. The one on the left is me. The one on the right is Dorothy. Michael studied the image. The two women looked happy, fulfilled. Did you enjoy working there? We did. It was a good family, treated the staff well, but what we loved most was cooking for them, seeing their satisfaction when they tasted something we'd made. And when did you create the shrimp gumbo? Oh, that was the day after the party, Martha smiled. There was so much shrimp left, and Dorothy said we couldn't waste it. So we decided to make something special. Just like that, no planning. The best recipes are born that way, young man, from necessity, creativity, the desire to make something good with what you have. Grace poured more coffee and brought out some homemade cookies. Chef Michael, tell me something. When was the first time you cooked? The very first time? I must have been about 8. My mother was sick, my father was working, and I got hungry. I made scrambled eggs. How'd it go? Terrible, Michael laughed. Burned the eggs, made a mess of the whole kitchen, nearly set the dish towel on fire. But did you feel something special? Michael paused to think. I felt like I was taking care of myself, like I was solving a problem with my own hands. And when did you decide to become a chef? Much later. As a teen, I started working at a pizzeria to earn money. The owner taught me a few things, and I realized I liked the kitchen environment. The environment or the power? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? In the kitchen, the chef is in charge. Everyone obeys. Did that appeal to you? Michael reflected honestly. Maybe. Maybe I liked being in control. And when did you start yelling at the staff? I don't remember exactly. It was gradual. The more responsibility I had, the more pressure I felt, and I ended up taking it out on the team. Do you see the problem? Martha asked. You turned the kitchen into a battlefield instead of a place of creation. But the pressure is real. Demanding customers, bills to pay, quality standards to maintain. The pressure is real, Grace agreed. But how you handle it is your choice. You can take it out on the staff or create an environment where everyone works together to face the challenges. Easier said than done. It is. But if it were easy, it wouldn't be worth learning. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Amanda, returning from work in the late afternoon. "Good afternoon, everyone. How was the chef's second day of school?" "Educational," replied Michael. "Your mother and grandmother are strict teachers." "Good thing, because if it were easy, I wouldn't learn anything." Amanda poured herself coffee and joined the group. "Mom, have you told him about the test yet?" "What test?" Michael asked. Grace and Martha exchanged glances. "Tomorrow you'll be tested," Grace announced. "You'll have to make lunch all by yourself from shopping to finishing the meal." "But I haven't learned enough yet." "You'll work with what you know, and we'll see if you've truly absorbed the lessons of the last 2 days. What should I make?" "Whatever you want, but it has to feed 4 people, cost no more than $30, and use only ingredients you find at the Queen's Farmers Market." $30 for 4 people? "That's the budget a normal family has for lunch," Amanda explained. "If you can't do it, it means you still don't understand how real people live." Michael felt the familiar kitchen pressure, but this time it came with something new, the desire to prove he was really learning. "I accept the challenge." "Great. Tomorrow at 6:30 you'll take the money and go to the market alone. By 8 you'll be back to cook. At noon you'll serve lunch. And if I pass the test? Then we'll start talking seriously about shrimp gumbo," said Martha. "And if I fail?" "Then you'll leave and never come back," Grace replied without hesitation. The night was long for Michael. Lying in bed at his upscale apartment, he planned the next day's menu. He had to balance flavor, quantity, price, and time. It was more complicated than preparing dinner for 50 restaurant customers. He listed ingredients, calculated portions, imagined combinations. But above all, he tried to apply the lessons of the past few days: care, respect for ingredients, attention to detail. The next morning, he arrived at Grace's house at the agreed time. She waited for him with the $30 in an old wallet. "Remember, it has to include spices, oil, everything. You can't use anything already in our kitchen." "Understood. And you have 2 hours to cook, not a minute more." "Got it. You'll go alone. No one to give tips or help with choices." Michael walked to the market with butterflies in his stomach. It was a feeling he hadn't had in years, the fear of failure. He spent 15 minutes just observing, studying prices, weighing possibilities. Finally, he settled on a simple but flavorful menu: chicken stew with potatoes, seasoned rice, lettuce and tomato salad, and a surprise dessert. He haggled with vendors just as he'd seen Grace do. He chose ingredients carefully, prioritizing flavor over appearance. He kept strict control of the budget. In the end, he spent $28.50. He kept the leftover 50-cent coin as a trophy. Back at the house, he found the 3 women seated in the living room, waiting like judges. "You may begin," Grace said. "And remember, 2 hours." Michael organized the ingredients on the small counter, washed everything carefully and began cooking. He applied every technique he'd learned: rice left undisturbed, seasonings measured by taste, care in every step. As he cooked, he chatted with Martha, who watched from her chair. "Mrs. Martha, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you miss those times?" "I do. They were simpler times. People knew each other better, helped each other more. And nowadays? Now everything is so rushed, so distant. People don't stop to talk, to learn each other's stories." "That's true. At the restaurant, I barely know the staff." "Exactly. And you miss out on so much good because of that." While the chicken cooked, Michael prepared dessert: a banana compote with cinnamon, using the ripe fruit he had picked out especially. "That smells wonderful," Amanda commented, appearing in the kitchen. "Thank you. I'm trying to apply everything I've learned." And what stood out the most these days? Patience, learning that some things can't be rushed. And what else? That simple ingredients can make special dishes if treated with respect. Right at 2 o'clock, Michael served lunch in the dining room. 4 simple but well-presented dishes, all warm and fragrant. The 3 women tasted in silence, savoring each dish carefully. Michael waited anxiously, more nervous than in any cooking competition he'd ever entered. "The rice is perfect," Martha finally said. "Light, seasoned just right." The chicken is tender and flavorful, Amanda added, and the salad is fresh. The dessert was a pleasant surprise, Grace finished. Sweet just right, cinnamon well distributed. So, Michael asked, did I pass the test? The three exchanged glances again. You passed, Grace said, but not because the food was good. No? You passed because you showed you can listen, learn, and apply what you learn. That's more important than making a perfect dish. And now? Now you're ready to learn about real shrimp gumbo, Martha announced. Tomorrow we'll start with the full history of the recipe. Michael felt a satisfaction unlike any award he'd ever won. It was the satisfaction of being judged by standards that went beyond culinary skill. Just one more thing, Grace said. How was it cooking alone again? Different, more personal, like every step mattered. That's how it should always be, Martha said. Every dish you make is a chance to care for someone. And at the restaurant? At the restaurant too, every customer who walks in is someone you can feed well, someone who can leave satisfied and happy. I never thought of it that way. Because you were focused on other things, on profit, on status, on competition, you forgot the basics. Cooking is an act of love. Michael held on to those words like a precious recipe. On the fourth day in Grace's house, he would finally start learning the gumbo. But he knew he'd already learned something far more valuable, a new way to see cooking and the people who do it.